My guest today has got a pretty impressive sporting CV. She had an 18-year international rugby career, was named the U.S.A.'s Player of the Decade in 2010, and in 2017 was inducted into the World Rugby Hall of Fame. She has now added clothing designer to her CV as well. She is the incredible Phaidra Knight. Phaidra, thank you for speaking to us today. How are you doing?
Doing great, doing great. It's a bit hot here in the East Hampton, New York, but that's how I like it. So it's good.
It looks pretty nice through those windows behind you. Um,
It is
I
nice.
have, I have to say, getting ready to talk to you today and looking at what you've been up to this year, you don't look like you've slowed down that much, considering, we've had this strange year of a global pandemic and not much has been able to happen. What have you been up to the last few months?
Honestly, it's been the busiest time of my life. It seemed like the day that I left New York City in preparation for the shelter in place, which is March 15th, things really took off into sort of a Mach 5 speed mode. I was training. I'm actually for about a year now. I've been training to fight as a mixed martial artist, and so when I left New York City, I left in preparation to move out to the East Hampton so that I could continue my training. Also, I didn't want to stop. My partner and I didn't want to stop the momentum of this clothing line. So it's just been incredibly busy, and I'm happy about that. Couldn't imagine it being any different.
We'll talk about your not just your rugby career, but your increasingly varied, by the sound of it, sporting career in a moment. What inspired you, though, to get designing and put out this PSK Collective line of clothes?
I've been a lifelong athlete, and as a lifelong athlete, I always struggled with finding clothes that fit me. And so that's really what inspired me to create a fully inclusive, diversity focused fusion of street and activewear line that would really cater to athletically bodied girls. I felt their pain. I wanted to combine my love of clothing and fashion with my passion for women's rights and equality. Our brand mission and values are to inspire young women to be active and confident, body positive and inspired. And the PSK Collective, like I said, is a fully size inclusive and diversity focused active lifestyle brand built by women and for women.
How important is that inclusivity for you? Because it's quite bizarre, really, that someone that's been, at the top of her sport across an 18-year period struggle to find even activewear that kind of fits, because that's what it's for.
Right. I come from a number of marginalized populations, being Black American, being gay, and being a woman, right? And so I know what it is to be left out and not to be given sort of a fair shot. Knowing that I've gone through this all my life and it's just the norm, I wanted to be able to create a way and at least chip away at this terrible thing, to be able to create opportunities and inspire sort of a change in thought, for female athletes to not be so marginalized, to not, to really have their own way, their own forum.
In terms of feeling included in a sense of belonging, as someone, like you say, that, belongs to three marginalized groups, how important has sport generally been in making you feel a part of something and belonging as you've gone through life?
Oh, wow. Sport, especially rugby, right? Where you have so many different size people. If you're a small person, then there's a place for you, likely on the wing or at scrum half, right? If you're a bigger person, but maybe not as fast as the wing, there's probably a place for you, in the forwards. And so sport has been probably, and like I said, rugby more than any other sport has been such a lesson creator in just making space for everyone. And I think I'll mention this right now, and this is extremely controversial, but right now we're at a tipping point, at least in rugby, where, trans women are potentially at risk of being excluded. And so we are at a place, right, even though rugby's been incredibly inclusive, that, We're there, it's at a tipping point. And so it's just interesting to see that dynamic come into the game. But aside from that, I think it's just so important. The lessons learned in rugby, everyone supports each other, right? If you don't have support, you're likely not going to score. You're constantly surrounded by people that support you, no matter how they look, no matter what size they are, what color they are. They are a teammate and of equal value in moments when, most needed. So just really important. And so it's been so valuable for me. I've been an athlete ever since I could probably walk. And so I don't know any other way. And it looks the way it looks that I'm going to probably leave this world being an athlete too. So, so important. Sport has just been a life changer for me and then for many others.
Like we've mentioned, you played rugby for 18 years. You've just said yourself, you've lived every second of your life an athlete, plan to die one. You've had many acts to your career. There's been the rugby, you're a CrossFit competitor, I think. You're the developmental team for the United States bobsled. Now mixed martial arts. What is it that keeps you motivated and looking to find these new things to do, new ways to challenge yourself?
I do it because I can and I want to, just plain and simple. I want to do it. I can do it. I am fortunate enough that I've figured out a way to keep my body active and strong, and competitive. And I think, one of the probably a bigger driving force for me too, is that I want to be able to create a platform, a large platform, to be able to utilize and fight for all of the social justice causes that I believe in. Women's equality, hence the PSK Collective and my association with the Women's Sports Foundation, racial justice. A really big love of mine is working with incarcerated youth and being able to provide outlet, an avenue of constructive network for them. And so these things are near and dear to me. And I'm able to I hope to be able to sort of be at the world-class level in MMA as well, and really utilize my platform in a way that I probably didn't with rugby to push these things further down the road.
In terms of your rugby platform, rugby in the USA for women, there is no professional league, and USA Rugby was one of the early casualties of the COVID outbreak and is now sort of restructuring and under bankruptcy filings. Are you concerned about the state of USA Women's Rugby?
Not really. I'm really not concerned. A number of the female athlete leaders, people like Jenny Liu, people like Jamie Burke, all national team players who are now taking the reins, and not only on the pitch, but they're taking the reins as leaders on councils, as leaders potentially in the boardroom. We have worked so hard, and the people that came before us have worked so hard to create, the women in particular, to create the opportunity that lies now for women in the sport. We have for so long advocated for equal treatment, equal resources, equal media, and equal, like in the case of playing, just equal calendar to the men's. And so we continue to mount that pressure on our NGB, USA Rugby, and sort of write it into the laws, if you will. And we continue to put that pressure on World Rugby to do the same, to aim to create the women's game and to put money and real resources behind the women's game in the way that they have with the men's game. You're not going to it's just not going to appear. You've got to get the sport on television. You've got to get it on some of these streaming platforms so that people can see it. And so I'm very hopeful because of the leadership. I'm also hopeful because the women's program has been able, especially at the U.S. level, has been able to sustain such a high level in terms of ranking in the world, essentially fueling themselves, right? With the exception of the sevens team, right? Because they do receive some grant and money from USOPC and some support from USA Rugby. Our 15s team really hasn't, right? And this year we're at a place where they had to raise their own money. They got a very small amount of funding through fundraising and through USA Rugby, but Alicia Washington and Christine Summer have gone out and created the women's 15s, or I'm sorry, X5 foundation, right? And that foundation is the fundraising mechanism for the women's 15s team. They are taking their destiny into their own hands. But they have some incredible pioneers that have done that did it in 1991, that USA Women's World Champion team. You had Kathy Flores, to name a few that were a part of that. But they have some incredible shoulders that they're standing on to propel them forward. And I think when you have that kind of leadership at the national level, that folks that are doing it rather than complaining about it, then it's only going to trickle down. And so I think from a club perspective, when they can see the national team and see, like I said, what they're doing, it will inspire more grassroots rugby. We're also restructuring in a way that I think will be a bit more effective than the way we were. And I think there's just greater alignment among our councils. And so I do have a tremendous amount of hope. I don't have as much concern in a negative way, but I feel pretty good about the women's program in the U.S. and where we're going. We certainly need more support and more opportunity, but I feel good about the people that have invested themselves into pushing it forward.
How do you feel more generally about women's sport globally and how it's going to come through this time? Because women's sport has suffered in a lot of countries more so than the men's sport has out of the pandemic. But if women's sport takes the reins and, as US Women's Rugby leads its own destiny, is that the way forward? Are there reasons to be positive about women's sport despite having seen none of it for months?
Absolutely. And I was interviewed at the beginning of this pandemic, and the same question was asked, and I had the same answer. I feel like this is an incredible opportunity for women's sports. And you look at this collective of women who have started the soccer team, the professional soccer team in LA, right? Angela Heakley's is a friend of mine. Julie Foudy is a friend of mine. Those folks are in a part of the ownership of that team. They have, done something very special. And I think that model is the model of the future. We are so much stronger in numbers than we are individually. And I think that we are catching on to our way forward. We have to come together. Women have to come together, and it doesn't mean at the expense of excluding men, because we welcome allies, right? We just don't really want naysayers. And so what we'll do with that is we'll make them into allies also, but we have to do it together. And that's the way forward. And so I think if every sport and when every sport starts to take on that model, it's going to be good. Women are so accustomed everywhere to working with less. That's how we were brought into the world. And so inherently we know how to handle that. So going through this pandemic, although it's been difficult, right? I know with the Olympians around the world, they haven't been able to compete this summer. I would have been returning from Japan just this past weekend from watching rugby, right? The disappointment of that, I think a lot of female athletes in particular are taking it and they're fueling it and putting it into their training. They're putting it into other things and making it, and creating positive results so that in 2021, they're going to go out and basically blow the doors off the hinges. So I have a lot of faith in women in sport, because this is nothing unusual for us. We are used to working with nothing and creating some really good things. I spent a lot of time as a kid before I was 5 and had to start school. Spent a lot of time with my grandfather, Dorsey Knight. And, I'd go fishing with him. I'd, go everywhere he went, right? I'd go to pig auctions with him. What you name it, I was there. And one thing that he always said to people when he introduced me was, it's like, he called me Faye. He's like, this is my granddaughter, Faye, and she can do anything. And this is when I was 4, right? And so I didn't really understand it. I didn't even really listen to it. But when I think back, I remember him saying that. And I know that all my life I've felt like I could really do anything. And I think that's the case for everyone. I think especially young girls. they can do anything they put their minds to. And so, you know, this collective, the PSK collective, is here to help reinforce that belief. You can do anything, right? So thank you for your time. Thank you for having me today.
No, great to speak to you. And yeah, good luck with the collective. It looks fantastic.
Thank you so much.